for decades, really, in the 20th century, kind of the same images that we'd see over and over again. CCA wasn't one of them. And I think just kind of over the time, kind of his memory was lost. He was very well respected in his lifetime. He was hired by church leaders to do different projects, including murals in the Manti Temple. But it was just sort of, just kind of an accident of time and and circumstance.
It is time for another episode of the Cultural Hall, and excited for where this episode may go. Welcoming into the Cultural Hall, Jenny Champoux. Thank you
Hi,
for
Richie.
being here.
Thanks
Great
for
to
having
have
me.
you here. We were talking sort of offline a little bit about that you live in Colorado and some of the love that we both have for music. As we chat today, I'm really excited to be able to talk about this book that you have recently authored with the University of Illinois Press. It is part of the Introduction to Mormon Thought series, and we're going to be talking about C.C.A. Christensen, which just seems like way too many initials. So let's start there. C.C.A. Christensen. Some people may recognize the name. Certainly within the church, we have lots of Christensens. I'm thinking Mr. Mac and some of that stuff. But who is C.C.A. Christensen from a big kind of over-the-top
Yeah,
perspective?
so first of all, it stands for Carl Christian Anton Christensen.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he almost always went by CCA, as far as we can tell, in his letters and his writings, and letters addressed to him. And that was kind of common for Danish people, that they would go by. They often had a bunch of names like that and would just go by those initials. So
But putting
CCA.
a latter-day lens on it, like we think it's sort of weird when it's like Dieter F. Uchtdorf, and
Yeah.
we sort of do that, but it just seems like you're throwing out so many letters
Mhm.
beforehand. Is it just the tradition of that cultural thing to be like throw a bunch of letters and then say my last name?
Hmm. I mean, it is pretty common. I know one of his mission companions that ended up coming to Utah and continued to be a lifelong friend was um, JFF Darius.
Hmm.
And that was often, I mean, his name was John, but it was also often JFF is how I
Huh.
see it. So
Huh.
I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know. But yeah, I just call him CCA typically is how I refer to him.
Now I want to know what is your middle initial because I want to address you as J, whatever your middle initial shampoo is for the rest of this interview.
Oh, okay. It's P for
Okay,
page. Yeah.
JP, perfect. Uh,
JP.
this Introduction to Mormon Thought, we've talked with several of the different authors that have put together these various books. Some of them mainstream members of the church, others that are just sort of around Mormon thought. Are they being culminated in what will eventually be like a large like book or series, something that we can purchase, and or is it just we're seeing how it goes, and this time it's CCA Christensen?
Yeah, so the series editors are Joe Spencer and Matt Bowman, and they just have this great vision for thinking more broadly about how to define Mormonism and also Mormon thought. So thinking about maybe some of the figures in history that have contributed to the way Latter-day Saints think about their identity, um, but maybe haven't really been studied as closely. And so I think they were initially planning a series of 40 books on
Hmm.
40 different individuals. I think that may end up being more than that. There are, how many are out? Maybe 10, maybe 8 or 10 are already published, um, with many more in the works and some that I'm really excited about.
And how is it that you get involved? I know they do sort of a call out, and then people say, "Hey, what about CCA Christensen?" Is that how that worked?
Yeah, I heard about the series a few years ago. Couple of my friends, my colleagues were writing. Christine Haglin was doing one, and Michael Austin did I think the very first one that was published. And I know Joe and Matt, the editors. So I reached out to them and I said, "Hey, I have some ideas of other," because I'm an art historian. I said, "Here are some artists that you might want to think about." And they were so kind. They said, "Well, Jenny, do you want to write one on an artist?" And like, well, yes, I do. So I was already working on CCA Christensen, so it was a perfect way to roll my projects into this book and kind of bring everything together.
it would seem to me a little bit like picking a favorite, and so I'm not putting you on the spot as far as that goes. But when you talk about LDS artists and
Mhm.
that have, have this influence with on not only how we see the Savior or early days of the church or something like that, CCA Christensen being one of them. But how do you know, or how did you feel, or how did you determine to go? I'm gonna put all eggs in the CCA Christensen basket when undoubtedly you could rattle off 4 or 5 other ones that would be just as instrumental
Yeah.
in sort of thought.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's so much work to be done in Latter-day Saint art history. I
Hmm.
feel like we're just starting to tap into that. And I think that's going to be a huge area of research and writing in the next decade or so. Um, I, you know, I, I guess this was in 2018. I picked up a catalog of CCA Christensen's artwork. And this
Hmm.
was from a 1984 exhibition of his art at the Church History Museum. It was actually the inaugural exhibition when that museum opened,
Oh
was
wow.
this. Yeah, Richard Oman and Richard Jensen put it together, and my my grandparents had gone to it in 1984, and I had inherited their little exhibition catalog that they purchased there. And I was just kind of thinking of, kind of looking for another project, something to work on, and I picked up this catalog and I looked through it and I thought, how how do I not know these images? These are such amazing images. Why aren't they more familiar to me, either as a Latter-day Saint or an art historian? Because this is American art from the 19th century that is really unique and interesting. And I wasn't. I went to look for some sources. There were very, very few sources written on him and his art. And I just thought we need to bring more attention to the work that he did. So that's how I got started on him, and I've been thrilled with it. It's just been so fun to work on him the past few years.
I'm excited just to let everyone know. Jenny has provided some sort of did you know facts. This is the way that I like to do these kind of interviews, so that then, I mean, even if we don't go out and we purchase a book, which I'm encouraging you to do so, there will be a link in the show notes. You can have those sort of tabletop discussions where you're sitting down to dinner and you go, CCA Christensen, even if it was just, did you know many Danish folks use initials instead of their real names? You can start to share those kind of facts with people. So I'm excited to get into that. I do want to know a little bit about you. What compels someone to say art history? Let's go. Let's make that the life's passion.
That's such a great question. And my path was not, I mean, it was sort of a circuitous one. I majored in political science at BYU, but just thought art history was fun. So I did a art history study abroad at BYU and loved that.
Where did you
Ended up,
go?
well, we did England, Italy, and France. And it
So,
was like,
so, so be honest. How much of that was that you just also wanted to go to England and Italy and France, or was it really? Are you being honest and being pure and saying, yeah, you know what? It was just the art over there.
yeah, I'd say it was both.
Okay.
I thought the trip sounded really fun, and
Mhm.
I was excited to learn more about those cultures and the art there too. And I think at BYU they required us to take a couple of art history classes before we could go on the trip, and I just fell in love with it. I loved learning about it. I loved researching and writing it, and ended up doing a minor in art history. So then I got to my senior year. I was about to graduate in political science, and I just realized art history was my passion. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I did a master's degree in art history after that.
I think people would be curious, and so you're going to answer now for your entire industry. So
Oh
feel the
gosh.
weight of all of that. But like, what does an art historian do? Like, you're obviously you've shared this book, and you can do the research about that and give sort of an art perspective as far as what we'll talk about goes. But by and large, is it sort of those things like, did you know that Van Gogh and this history and the paint and the structure and this is what it is, and it's opening the doors of understanding to people? Is it we have those art historians so we can know how to value those things, like literally the financial value? Like, what
Mm.
people in your position, are they doing what you do, or what do they do in a large scale?
Yeah, I think it's some of all of that. I think one aspect of what I've done in my teaching with art history is just helping students learn how to read the language of art.
Hmm.
So thinking about the formal elements like line, color, shape, space and texture and balance and how an artist uses those visual elements to tell a story or to create meaning or a feeling in the art. And that takes a little bit of practice to learn how to do that. And then in my work, a lot of the work I do is looking at art and trying to situate it in its original context. What might the art tell us about the values of that culture or the history or um, kind of this dynamic relationship between how maybe an artist is pulling from the beliefs and culture that he's in to create art, but then also at the same time, the art might influence that culture, that art can have an effect on how people think, how they think about history, what stories they believe, what scriptures are the most important to them because they're the ones they've seen the most often visualized. Um, so yeah, I think art history is just so fun because it's a great way to understand history and people and the way that humans have wrestled with the big questions of, the purpose of life and relationships and but done in a visual way.
So then putting it in a latter day, not the church,
Mhm.
but in our time context, when we see so much about like AI taking over everything and
Mm,
artists and doing all those things, so much of what you related was the personal like touch that goes into the visual representation of whatever
mm,
they're showing. There isn't a personal touch in many of those things,
yeah.
although sort of discerned from prompts that are given and, the things that AI is able to take in and see, but there isn't any sort of spirit or person or anything that is
Mhm.
creating those image is,
Mhm.
uh, are we doomed then?
Are
Because
we doomed?
because we can learn so much and we can feel so much from things that were intentionally to be felt, but there's not any
Yeah.
feeling. Try as we might with AI to evoke a feeling that it's ones and zeros to that.
Yeah, sure. Well, and the other complicating factor there is that so much of the AI art is actually pulled from a database of real art,
Hmm.
right? Like that's where it gets its ideas is, and that's a real problem for artists that want to protect their intellectual property and their work. And then if it's being taken and manipulated in this AI system, um, yeah, it's really a tricky question. I know I was involved with a Book of Mormon art contest for BYU students the past 3 years.
Hmm.
And that was a question we had to wrestle with as a judging committee is do we allow AI art or not? And we decided not to allow it because it wasn't, yeah, we wanted the personal wrestle of the artist with the scripture and the art medium, and to have something come from that and not just putting prompts into a computer.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking that question. I gave you no sort of heads up, and I think that you did that very, very good justice as far as we go.
Okay.
I'm excited for you and for us because now we're going to get into the stuff that we and the book is all about. We'll take a break. We'll come back in the second block, and we're going to dive right into CCA Christensen. We've got like 9 facts that we're going to just sort of share and expound upon. So I'm excited to do that. We'll come back in the second block of the Cultural Hall. The turning of another year makes me start to think about how I have not done one of these ads for Best DJ in Utah in over a year. I'm sorry, everyone, but it means business is good. It means you should hire Best DJ in Utah. Why, that's me. And I even have people that work for me, trained by me, affordable, and travel all over, literally all over, going to Florida this year, for instance. And this year means 2026, not this year, which could have been several years in the past, like we've been doing. You can go to bestdjinutah.com, or you can go and find us on our Google business page. It's Best DJ in Utah. You will see that as of the recording of this almost 700 five-star reviews. Find out what so many listeners of the Cultural Hall have already found out. I'm great at parties. I'm great in your ear holes, but I'm also great at parties. So find out if I'm available for your date. We can help you out. Weddings, baptisms, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, funerals. I'll do a funeral. Best DJ in Utah. Here in the second block of the Cultural Hall, remember you can become a Patreon saint of the Cultural Hall by going to patreon.com/the Cultural Hall. As little as $5 a month gets you to be a part of the Telestial tier of the Patreon saints. You can become a Celestial saint if you would like. It gets you to be a part of that secret but not sacred Facebook group where all the Patreon saints are hanging out and we talk about various tangential, not, sometimes we get really into the episodes and the things that are shared. Other times it's like, I wonder what kind of bookshelf that is that's behind Jenny, or, some of the things that I've been to Colorado, which is where Jenny's from. I wonder if she's ever been to that restaurant. We get into anything and everything there, and being a Patreon saint is an honor. So please go to patreon.com/the Cultural Hall and join us. Okay, CCA Christensen. Here's number one. Highlights about CCA Christensen, and I know I gave you the nearly impossible task where it's like take a full scope of a well-lived life and boil it down to some points. Would you mind? But you've done a great job. Was born to a poor family in Copenhagen, Denmark in 1831. As a youth, he lived and studied at a poorhouse boarding school before taking classes at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so he was the oldest child. His father was an alcoholic. His father had a job in a factory, but had a hard time holding a job. His mother, from all accounts, seems to be amazing, an amazing woman. This woman, Dorothea, to support the family, would go to different houses around town and do house cleaning and laundry, and she would take in sewing, all the while having more children. And CCA, as the oldest child, remembers in his journals later, he remembered carrying his baby brother across town to his
Oh,
mother
geez.
so she could feed him while she was, on her job. So I think it taught CCA at an early age to, that the family had to work together, and he took on a lot of responsibilities at a young age and took care of his little brothers at home.
It seems like a thing with that though, because as part of that, you're saying he starts, studying at a boarding school, a poorhouse boarding school, and then taking classes at the
Mhm.
Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts. That doesn't sound like, the neighbor teaching crayons, forgive the crude example, down on the corner. That
Right.
seems like it was,
Yeah.
hey, I'm making a sacrifice to be able to do this, and a pretty significant investment may not be the right word, but that they recognize something within CCA to go, hey, come and study here as well.
Yeah, Richie, you're onto something, and there is definitely more to this story. You're right. His parents, by the time he was 11 years old and they had more children, they just couldn't support all the children. So, his mother put him in this poorhouse boarding school where he could live and be taken care of and take classes, and they still stayed in touch. But he lived there, and a woman, a benefactress of the orphanage, saw one Christmas, she saw CCA had decorated the orphanage Christmas tree with these little cutout paper designs that he'd cut with scissors out of paper. And that was actually something his mother had taught him as a child, how to
Hmm.
do that. And this woman, her name was Anne Sophie Henriksen. She was so impressed with this that she met CCA and offered to sponsor him at his classes at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts, which was not something that CCA would have been able to afford on his own. So that's how he got there.
And now for this next one, so I'll kind of read this. While an art student is when he met the first Latter-day Saint missionaries as they
Mhm.
arrived in Copenhagen. He joined the church in 1850 and then threw himself into the work of learning the gospel, reading the Book of Mormon, helping with the Danish translations, and essentially just it seems like it was like, I'm in, I'm all in. What do you need? Let's go.
Mhm.
No struggles along the way to his conversion?
Yeah, it's interesting. His mom, Dorothea, she was among the very first converts to join the church in 1850 there in Copenhagen. And then just a month later, CCA joined the church too. And I think once he was in, he was all in. And he even later wrote in his journal that, you know, he remembered feeling like there was this sense of like Jesus is imminently coming back to the earth. Like the second coming is about to happen. We've got to get to Zion. We've got to get to Utah and build up Zion before this happens. And he wrote in his journal that suddenly his his art education didn't seem as important because they were expecting Jesus to come back, in just a few years. So that became his full focus.
Uh, was it do you suppose, or is there anything to support it in the thing that he said, that this also becomes a connective point for he and his mom, where he had been put out to boarding school and
Mm,
then,
hmm
50, if I'm doing math right, that puts him like 18, 19 years old,
Uh-huh.
to be able to reconnect now as an adult, air quotes, and
hmm
have this thing in common with his mom and with his family of origin.
Yeah, for sure. Everything I've read in the letters and journals indicates that CCA had a great relationship with his mother and his brothers always. Um, his father, I think, was a little trickier, and his father never joined the church. But yeah, then the mother and two of the brothers went to Utah right away, and unfortunately, she died there just a year later in Utah, so CCA wasn't able to see her again because he stayed behind to serve a mission in Scandinavia first.
And which is that's actually the next point. So it's interesting to me. This is all happening pretty quick, and maybe the narrative that we get of the early churches is it's like you're an apostle, and we just go, wait a minute, that is that how
Yeah.
this worked?
Yeah.
Beginning, if you believed and then you were willing to serve, he dove headlong into serving three missions in Scandinavia. We'll get to the
hmm
other two, but first in Norway in 1853.
hmm Yeah, yeah, he served there for several years, and there was this interesting moment in Scandinavia, and this is actually why the Latter-day Saint missionaries came over in 1850 was Denmark had a new constitution that allowed for a freedom of religion that had not previously existed.
Hmm.
So it was the Lutheran Church was the state church. And then in 1850, suddenly other Christian denominations were allowed. And so immediately, the church sends a couple of missionaries over from Utah. They start preaching, and then CCA and his family join the church. And then he goes on a mission to Norway. And Norway didn't have the same kind of religious freedoms that Denmark did, and it was all still very new anyway after, generations of loyalty to the Danish Lutheran Church. And in Norway, CCA faced pretty significant persecution. He was sometimes chased by mobs. He had things thrown at him. He was arrested twice and put in jail twice. One time for 5 days with only bread and water. Um, and he in his journals later, looking back on those experiences, felt like they were really important foundational experiences to him. And he wrote that he felt kind of like the early apostles being persecuted for their beliefs. And yeah, it didn't faze him. He seemed to stay true to his faith, and in spite of hardships, the hardships didn't seem to bother him. Yeah.
Well, and added into all of that, if I'm understanding right, that in name of being dedicated to church, that his mom then left where in proximity with him, and then
Mhm.
passed away and never saw her again. So being able to
hmm
draw on her strength, but this very important relationship that drew her away from him, and then teaching
hmm
people and being persecuted, that seems
Yeah.
like the very foundation for the tortured artist that we hear
Right.
about. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
these tough situations of yeah, geez,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
decided to do it two other times too. That's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. Because served two other missions, correct?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And those were, he was already in Utah at that point. So it meant traveling back across the American plains and back across the Atlantic to get back to Scandinavia.
And
But
and with, oh,
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No,
No,
please.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a space in there is time that passes between those. At the time
Mhm.
that he serves his second mission, he's like 33, 34, and then his third mission, if I'm doing my
Mhm.
math right, he's like 54.
Yeah.
Is that common for Latter-day Saints at that time to go continue to do it? I know in the early days we hear about
Mhm.
take no personal script and find your way and hope you get back here and we'll figure out someone in after Joseph, right? Like that's sort of how
Yeah.
this narrative gets thrown out. I
Hmm.
don't think that I realized like
Hmm.
30s and 50s
Hmm.
people would be going on missions like this.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know how common it was to serve multiple European missions like that. Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously when he was older doing those second and third missions, he had a wife and kids at home, and it meant leaving them. On his second mission, he actually uh, came home with another young lady who became his second wife in
Hmm.
Utah. She was from Norway. So, yeah, so then he was, I guess, in a plural marriage. His first wife was named Elise, and then the second one was Marin. And altogether, he had 14 children. And then his third mission, yeah, he was a bit older then, and I think he had 13 children at the time that he left for that mission. Um,
So
yeah,
maybe
so
just maybe wanted a little peace and quiet. I'm kidding. I couldn't help but go
uh,
for the joke. But I guess to me it shows a couple of things. One, that the church trusted him so much and that he was so in, as it were,
mhm,
that he's like, listen, whatever I can do to be able to do that. A unique set of skills for that part of the world. We
mhm.
don't hear a ton, maybe I'm not listening to it or whatever, but you don't hear a ton about missionaries going to serve and being successful in that part of the world at that time. So just being able to be like, yeah, we know CCA, we know he's solid. Let's get him there again. He's willing to go. Send him out and let him do the furthering of the work there.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, in the 1850s, the church actually had great success with finding converts in Scandinavia, partly because of the opening up of this religious freedom. But also, there was this moment where, I don't know, America was seen as a place where you could escape the sort of class structure and economic um, constraints that people found in Scandinavia.
Hmm.
And so a lot of them were people like CCA's family, working class, economically disadvantaged people that thought, well, it looks like we can go to America. And, I mean, certainly the religion was a big pull for them, but also another factor was this idea of being to go to a place where you could work hard and create a life for yourself in a way that you couldn't do in Europe or in Scandinavia at the time because of the social and economic strictures there.
And also, we're still gathering Zion at this time before we're saying build up Zion wherever you're at. This was still, hey,
Hmm.
come here, please. We need to have the
Hmm.
strength in that. I can't imagine the scenario of like, hey, I know I've been gone on a mission. This is now my second wife. Please meet Marin. Was that received well by Elise, or was that as I would
Yeah,
anticipate it might be?
such a great question. I wish we had more information on that. It's interesting because Elise's family, that they were Norwegian, and they hesitated to let her join the church. This was before she even married CCA in the 1850s. They weren't sure about joining the church because of polygamy. That was
Mm.
their big holdup. They were worried about that. But then CCA and Elise got married as they left Europe to come to Utah for the first time. Um, and then when she's pregnant with their fourth child, he goes back on his second mission. Marin was apparently in his traveling company until they got to Liverpool, um, which was sort of the place where you'd get on your transatlantic voyage. And then she was on a different ship, but they met back up in Utah. And then, yeah, I don't know the details of how it came about, but she did become his second wife. And everything I've read in their letters and journals and the family remembrances, um, indicates that the family was pretty unified.
Hmm.
You know, they shared a barn and a root cellar. They had two separate houses, apparently right next to each other. Um, but and the children would call the mom's Aunt Mary and Aunt Elise. Um, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's it.
That's I would love to know more about that. That would be a great secondary project here, or just additional project, is to think more about the women and their role and what their life was like.
And it's significant to note, kind of with that, like, if we aren't telling our own stories, here's the plug for doing your journaling, everyone. Like, no
Mm,
one knows what's going on with you unless you are writing that somewhere. And so it's easy for us because we get sort of fascinated about these different times, these 150, 175 years ago, and we look at this and go, oh, we wish we had more. At some point, someone will be looking at our life and go, I wish I knew more about Jenny. I wish I knew why she did this project. I wish she would have written stuff down and I would be able to do it. And the same for me. I'm a it always strikes me when I hear, oh, I wish we knew more about this, that I go, I need to be the person responsible for so people can know more about what I was thinking, what I was doing. Maybe people won't care, but I bet that they probably think that people wouldn't have cared about them. And we sit here now fascinated to go, what was
yeah,
the sharing a barn and a different
yeah,
house and what would, all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, for sure.
Let's take a break. When we come back in the third block, we get really into the art part of CCA Christensen. Some of the things that people would maybe most likely know him for. So we're getting into that. And then there are three questions we ask everyone who steps into the Culture Hall. I'll ask those of you. We'll get back to all of that here in the third block of the Cultural Hall. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, you know what? I could do a podcast. You should. Having a podcast has been one of the things that a lot of people have really sought out to do. Some just to see, can I even do this thing? I'm here to tell you that you can. And I have consulted lots of people to be able to do it. Now, some people, I consult them and they go, oh, this was way more than I ever thought it would be. And other people go, oh, you know what? A podcast isn't for me, but you helped me decide to do this thing. Whatever it is, maybe it will end up being a podcast, or maybe it'll just end up being that we have some great times together. You realize that it's time to do that in a different season of your life, or this season is now. You can reach out to me, contact@theculturalhall.com, and say podcast consultant, or my email address, Richie, RICHIET, Stedman @gmail.com. And be sure that you put podcast consultant in the subject line. Would love to talk to you and see if having a podcast would be the right thing for you. Here in the third block of the Culture Hall, remember, you can always send us an email, contact@theculturalhall.com. You love Jenny. You want her to come back and be able to talk to us about other things that she's working on. Spoiler, she will be back in a future episode about another project that she's working on. But it won't just be me and Jenny. It'll be a bunch of other folks as well. Contact@theculturalhall.com is the email address. You love an episode, you hate an episode. You read a book and you want us to talk to the author. We don't talk about a particular subject and you feel like we should. That is where you can send all that stuff. Contact@theculturalhall.com. As we dive into the points that you sent beforehand, I thought this was significant. CCA was the most prolific 19th century artist of Latter-day Saint history and scripture. He combined his European art training with Latter-day Saint beliefs and subjects. He also wrote extensively, published poetry, essays, and letters to the editor. He helped write a history of the Scandinavian mission, and yet his work is not well known today.
Hmm. Yeah.
So is it because other people came into the light shortly after? Is it a fall from grace that we're going to learn about with CCA? Why is it, if he was, as you say, the most prolific 19th century artist of Latter-day Saint history, why are we not seeing and knowing more about CCA?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a combination of factors. One is that there weren't many artists working on Latter-day Saint history and scripture in the
Hmm.
19th century. Most 19th century LDS artists were doing landscapes.
Okay.
And so it wasn't really until the mid 20th century that the church leaders started really wanting and using illustrations of scripture in manuals and flip charts and things like that. There had been some before, but it didn't become as prolific until later. Another factor is that CCA, because he never reach the highest levels of his art training. He graduated from the Arts Academy, but he never took the live drawing classes to really like learn about anatomy and his style is a little, I mean, people like to call it naive. I don't know that that's the right word for it because I think it's actually very thoughtful. But it's not as skillful as others who came through the academy at the same time, like Carl Block,
Hmm.
who's an artist who's not LDS, but an artist that we use a lot in Latter-day Saint materials. Carl Block was a classmate of CCA Christensen's at the
Mm.
academy. They were there at the same time, and you look at their paintings side by side, and the skill level is just obviously different. And so I think, as part of church leaders wanting to project a sort of refinement and level of achievement in official art.
Hmm.
Maybe CCA didn't make that cut with his abilities. But then also, in like I was saying, in the mid 20th century, with like correlation efforts, and suddenly there's all these church manuals and publications and magazines, and there really were just a handful of artists that church leaders turned to most often to find that art. And most of them were actually not Latter-day Saint artists. Most of them were from other Christian traditions. And so, we had this for years, for decades, really, in the 20th century, kind of the same images that we'd see over and over again. CCA wasn't one of them. And I think just kind of over the time, kind of his memory was lost. He was very well respected in his lifetime. He was hired by church leaders to do different projects, including murals in the Manti Temple. But it was just sort of, yeah, just kind of an accident of time and and circumstance.
I want to go there. I had the opportunity before they, reopened, rededicated the Manti Temple to be able to go through. And in the best way that I can describe her, I was able to go on a tour with a woman who was sort of this rogue tour giver in the Manti Temple. She would say things multiple times. I'm not supposed to tell you about this. And I loved that. You could tell she just had so much love for the temple, so much love for each of the rooms and her history. I think she's from there, been there her entire life, had a considerable amount of involvement with the Manti pageant. I don't want to out her as far as who she is, but it was great to be on the tour with her because the things that I had questions about, she was willing to talk to me about, whereas I think as a general populace, it's like, and we walk here, and now we walk here. Isn't that interesting? Thank you, everyone, for coming. Um, so I'm glad I was able to connect with her. But she
Yeah.
talked about the massive paintings in the Manti Temple. And correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it CCA Christensen who paints a dinosaur in the creation room?
That's right. Yes, he
Yes.
did. Yeah.
And I thought the story of how he was like, yeah, dinosaur. I thought that was kind of an interesting come at as well. Please share anything around that you feel like is significant for people to know about.
Yeah, I mean, so I talk about this in the book, so you could find more details there. And there's another scholar who had first noticed some years ago that CCA's dinosaur images in that mural look a lot like a French artist from the 19th century in this book about kind of natural history, the natural world. And so I got the book and I looked at it, and yeah, they're definitely he's definitely looking at these illustrations. This book was really the preeminent at the time, the most popular scholarship for a general audience on natural history. And I love that CCA is going to those kinds of sources, that he's not just making up what might a dinosaur look like. He's like, what's the best source to tell me what dinosaurs look like? And
Hmm.
he goes and gets that book, and then he combines some of the images and kind of makes his own thing. But he's going to the sources and trying to make it accurate, but with his own artistic touch. And what's great about that book too is it really shows kind of the development of the world or the earth in these periods of time, which is just what CCA wants to do in the creation room, where you have these kind of six periods of time as you go around the room showing the stages of development of the world.
With the love that you have for CCA, when they originally talked about like just essentially dismantling or destroying the murals that are painted there on the walls, why was that significant to you that they not do that?
Yeah, I mean, right, like these are these are old and like they're from
I mean, cheaper. I mean, let's be frank with it. Cheaper if they would have just torn it out.
yeah,
Quicker, we could have had the Manti Temple reopened quicker. I don't agree with any of these points, but I at least see a case where people go, listen, it was part of the thing. It's an older thing. We're just going to do this and do this way.
sure.
And you would not have been alone. There were thousands of people who said, no, no, no,
Yeah. Yeah.
please do not do this way. And I think to some they just go, what? Because of some scribbles, a little painting on the wall. That's why we're not doing
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
No.
and again, I don't agree with that thinking.
Okay.
But why? But why is it so significant? Why is it
hmm
so awesome that we decided to lean into? We're not going to do it that way. Thank goodness
Yeah.
people spoke up, and now we kept it the way that it is.
Yeah, so I think it was 1886 that he painted those. So I mean, as a historian myself, I just can't even imagine wanting to destroy that kind of artifact from our early history. And I think it tells us a lot about uh, the values of the time that CCA was hired to create this extravagant mural on the walls and to show this kind of joy in the world, a joy in um, thinking about the different kinds of plants and animals. And there's a couple of animals that have baby. There's like a mother and a baby, and you just see this kind of joy in creation and living and embodiment. And I think that tells us something about the values of the Latter-day Saints at the time. Just a second point, so much of the response to the message that those murals were going to be taken out originally
Hmm.
was about Minerva Teichert's murals in the same temple. Almost all of the like press coverage and petitions was about Minerva Teichert. Um, which I think says something about CCA's legacy and right, his murals are even older than
Yeah.
Teichert's by a bit. And people weren't as interested in his because I think people just didn't know him as well. Minerva Teichert's legacy has been kind of restored thanks to the work of some scholars in recent decades. And I hope that people can come back to CCA too as an early Latter-day Saint artist.
Well, and I definitely think things like this book that you've written, it's like this amazing individual found strength in the gospel, newly baptized, serving so many missions, you can't even keep track of all of it. Like that is who this significant person is. And to be able to connect that and go, I
Mm,
went to Manti one time. It was a couple hour drive. I didn't think I was going to like it. I went into the room. I saw these things that are so different from our temples that we're building now in great number. That temple is
mm,
so significant. And to me, the thing that I love and knowing and learning more in our conversation with this is that it seems to, just as the temple encourages us to be physically connected to ancestors in a way that if we just took a bunch of pictures of the wall and then tore them out and said, you can still see them. It's right there. Like I can be in the presence of where this tremendous thing was sweated and fretted and worked on. And the same for I had a tremendous amount of reverence sitting in the room with the ginormous work of Minerva Teichert to go,
mhm.
here's an individual who I think she broke her leg or something or back when she was, isn't that right? Well, she was
I'm not
painting her thing
sure.
in the temple. There was some sort
Okay.
of physical thing that occurred to her, so it was a literal like painstaking process. And so to be able to join with it, it makes me feel a part of something that I think
Yes.
that if we would have just been like, nah, it's easier if we just take down the walls, put some drywall up, everyone, that
Yeah.
I just think that we miss. And I don't
hmm
know that everyone understands like the significance of how like art, music, poetry, all of these kind of things can feel so very connecting. I don't know
hmm
that everyone gets it. So I just like to scream it.
Yes, I'm with you 100%. Preach it, Richie. I agree.
She's got both hands up in the air if you're not
Yeah.
watching the YouTube. She's got it. Preach emoji.
But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I've gone since the renovation, I've gone through the temple there at done a session at the Manti Temple, and it's a very different experience than at the Denver Temple, which doesn't have the murals like that. And I love what you said about it connecting us to our history and our ancestors, and you feel that continued presence through the workmanship of our ancestors. I love that.
To walk it just a little further, I'll just make assumptions on what you said. I don't know that CCA Christensen was the best artist ever, but it was
Right.
a guy who was
Hmm.
trying his, really hard, really hard, committed to the thing that he was doing,
Hmm.
and undertook this amazing thing. And this is a tribute to his life. And I think of how much that applies to me, where it's like I'm not the best at insert literally everything that I try,
Yeah.
but that I do have an eye single to the glory and just trying to help people out and whatever that thing would be. I hope that I wouldn't need to be of a certain stature before people go, yeah, just toss that out. That recording he did, that was terrible. That life he led, nah, we could do better, or we could do simpler, or we could do more affordable. It's sort of a beautiful tribute I've read into his
Mm.
story as
Hmm.
we've been chatting.
I like that. Yeah.
I want to know the last thing that you talk about is, well, the second to last in these points that you've given. By the way, you can see all of what we were going to talk about in the show notes. We didn't get to necessarily all of it, but you mentioned that he won a contest to
Hmm.
illustrate a church flip chart on the
Hmm.
life of Nephi. These 10 images were distributed by the Deseret Sunday School Union. So we
Hmm.
were flip charting in the 19th century.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen the original ones. The Church History Museum still has one of these original flipped. So he did the paintings, and then they would have a lithographer make them into lithographs that they could print lots of copies of. And they've made, yeah, they're about, I mean, I don't know, maybe 2 feet high.
Hmm.
And yeah, and they were bound at the top, and you'd flip them over, and so there were actually 12 images of the life of Nephi, and CCA did 10 of them, and then they had two others from a couple other artists. But yeah, he won this contest, and this was right after his third mission. It was right after he got home that he started working on this. He was actually at the time he'd been arrested for unlawful cohabitation because of his second wife, and so he was awaiting trial for that while he worked on these. um, and yeah, they're just, I mean, really, like I said, most Latter-day Saint artists at the time were not illustrating the Book of Mormon, or scripture at all, really. He's one of the only ones that is. And so I think that's just fascinating to think about. How do you, if you're CCA and you've never seen a picture of Nephi, how do you know how to illustrate it? Where do you start? How do you know what he would wear, or what he would look like? And so CCA had to make all these choices that now artists today, we kind of have this visual canon of, I mean, probably today we'd say headbands and the,
Sure.
the arm
What's the artist?
gauntlets.
His name? I've been racking my brain trying to think of his name, but the one that every one of them is just
Yeah.
shredded and
Yes.
what's
Arnold
that artist's
Freeberg.
name?
Arnold Freeberg.
Yeah, Freeberg. Yeah,
Mhm.
I think nowadays we would all sort of assume this is what Nephi looks like because
Right.
of the proliferation of the
Mhm.
Freeberg art. But this is at a time where someone was like, I don't know, maybe it says stature. All right, well, for the time, like there's something so kind of pioneering within that first CCA.
Mhm. Mhm.
With that, are any of these original 10 images or any of the other works? Obviously, people can see the stuff inside the Manti Temple that he's done, but is there
Mhm.
anything that people would automatically go, "Oh, that's CCA," that would they would come to mind?
Yeah, probably his most recognizable work is called The Handcart Company. It's from the year 1900, and it shows a little company of handcart pioneers, and they're just crossing a stream, and they're kind of out on the plains, and they're stopping just on the other side of the stream, and
Mm.
there's a girl picking up buffalo chips, and there's a guy starting a fire to cook food, and um,
Yeah, I've
that's
definitely
the
seen
one.
this one as
Yeah.
I sort
Hmm.
of drop it in and look at it.
Hmm.
But a life full of art
Hmm.
and producing these
Yeah.
things for the first time ever, and the walls of the temple and maybe that one are things that we've seen. That's uh, is it sort of beautifully tragic?
That we're not as familiar with his
Yes.
art. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I'm so excited about on this book. It's the first one in this series from the University of Illinois Press. It's the first one to include images.
Mm.
And I got a grant from the Charles Redd Center at BYU that allowed us to print full color images. So in this book, you'll be able to see these full color prints of the works that I talk about. And I'm just really excited for people to see them and spend time looking at them.
Yeah, significant. Jeez, so
Yeah.
cool. And who knows, fingers crossed, maybe there'll be an original CCA Christensen in the Salt Lake Temple. We don't know. That could be up on the wall. They could take a something, I don't know. I'm just throwing hope for stuff like that. I love with all of the attention being put towards that. I think that anything that the church puts on the walls of the inside of the temple of the in and around the celebration of that will instantly get lots of attention. So I hope we take advantage of that
Hmm.
in all ways, from our
Hmm.
history to the people that are leading the charge today. There's some tremendous artists now that I
Hmm.
just am like, geez, that is an interpretation I have never even thought of before. How awesome is that? So,
Yes, there's
yeah.
so much great art happening right now. Hmm.
If I had to put you on the spot, and I'm going to, uh, we talk about CCA Christians, and we sort of mentioned Minerva Teichert. Of these maybe earlier saints, what are a couple other ones that if people have just been jazzed about our conversation, that they're like, man, I want to know about some of these lesser known folks? Throw some names around. You don't have to give too
Hmm.
much with it, but maybe two or three names that people could go, oh, I will look up. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. Yeah, William Armitage is another 19th century artist who's actually a pretty skillful artist. Um, does a beautiful scene of of Jesus appearing to the Nephites from like Third Nephi. John Held Sr. Illustrated some scenes from the Book of Mormon that were published in a book called The Story of the Book of Mormon. And he has a really fun image of Jesus appearing to the brother of Jared,
Hmm.
and it's a type of Jesus's, I guess, facial features and hair is unlike anything else. And I think that's really fascinating to think about how early Latter-day Saint artists were thinking about depicting Jesus.
Hmm.
Um, and then, of course, some of the great, landscape artists like John Hafen and Loris Pratt. Uh, I mean, there's so many.
And your colleagues are like, she's not mentioning. I don't know why she's not, why
I
she didn't say this. No,
I
it's
know.
fine.
I'm sure I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you're great. You're great. I appreciate it. Again, just so everyone knows, you can check out, and now the book has full color prints. You can purchase the book, you guys. You can find the link for it in the show notes and be able to pick it up. Um, Huge shout out to the folks at University of Illinois Press for connecting the two of us to be able to talk about this. And now it's become the time that we ask the three questions that we ask everyone who steps into the culture hall. So I will ask those of you now. The first question is do you have a calling right now? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I have two callings. I am a teacher in the Relief Society in my
Okay.
ward, and I love that.
How often do you teach?
I teach once a month
Okay,
there.
good for you.
Yeah.
I'm in the elders quorum. It's like every 3 months. They're like, I guess we
Oh.
have to. He still has the calling. We'll let him do it one time. So once a month, okay.
And then I'm our ward disability specialist.
Incredible.
Yeah,
How has that calling been for you?
it's great. Yeah. We have a really wonderful stake disability coordinator who's helped us at the ward level think about how to better support um, all kinds of special needs in our wards. And just, a first step is just being aware of them, knowing what to look for, and then just being someone who can support. Sometimes in primary, I'll help with giving more specific strategies of how to help children that may need a little extra support in primary. But gosh, I mean, everyone's dealing with something, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think the more we could try to recognize that and make it an inclusive space, the more we're on the right path, right?
Right, because everyone needs to come to Jesus, not the people, not just the
Yeah.
people that are,
Mhm.
whatever the thing is. I think it's fascinating because I think so many people discount that, like that special needs. We sort of have a vision and what that comes up in our mind, but it's
Mhm.
also people that are deaf from
Yeah.
age or
Yeah.
sight from, those kind of things. It's all encompassed into that,
Yes.
and so I'm
Yeah,
so grateful that
absolutely.
we're
Mhm.
leaning into those things and going,
Mhm.
okay, so like everyone. Jesus meant everyone, not just like, the people
Yeah.
low. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you could pick a calling for yourself, either one that exists or make one up, what would you pick?
Gosh, I'm not sure I know how to answer that question. Can I tell you a quick story instead,
Yes,
by
please.
way of an answer?
Yes.
So, when my youngest child was just about to start nursery, so I had it was my third baby, and I felt like I had spent some years kind of on my own at church, taking care of little babies and stuff.
Hmm.
And my youngest was just about to start nursery, or I think he had just started nursery, and I was so excited to go back to like go to Sunday school with adults, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, and one of the counselors in the bishopric called me in and extended a calling to me to teach like CTR4. And I just burst into tears. And I mean, I didn't say no. I told him, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. But he was so great because he saw my genuine reaction to it. And he said, he asked me some questions about why I was feeling that way and got to know more about my circumstances and my needs at that time. And he said, okay, don't do anything. Just go home and let me talk to the bishop and we'll get back to you.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
bishop called me later that night, um, said they'd prayed about it and felt like they had a different calling in mind for me. And that calling was in the Relief Society presidency, and that was a wonderful calling for me at that time, and in so many ways. And since that time, I've served in the primary and the nursery many times, and those have been wonderful opportunities. But I'm so grateful that that counselor and that bishop were willing to uh, be open to new
Sure.
information and new revelation, and just, I don't know that there's like one favorite calling I've had, but just kind of the callings at different times in my life have meant different things.
Yeah, I appreciate that story because I think so many people just go, well, if God, God by way of his messengers asked me to do this, I might as well do it. And I've talked to enough leaders to know that there is sometimes like, hey, we have this spot that needs to be filled, and this person could do it. And if they don't get the extra information from you, if you don't advocate for yourself, if you don't share those things, if you
Mhm.
just say, yeah, I'll do it, you miss out on opportunities like what you're saying. It doesn't mean that it's that you won't circle back to it, doesn't mean that you won't eventually do that calling, or maybe you
Yeah.
will, or maybe you won't. But they can only do as well as they can do with the information that's given. And I think everyone needs to say, hey, you bet, but also know
Yeah,
that this is what's going on.
that's
That's
right. Yeah.
I love it. What a great example. I'll accept that as an answer
Thank you.
for for picking a calling. The last question we ask everyone, we ask you to interpret it however you would like. The question remains: what is your favorite part of your faith?
Gosh, that's hard. It's hard to narrow down, but something I've been thinking about lately is just I love um the knowledge that God is with us in the good times and the hard times, that
Hmm.
He's with us in all things. I feel like in my life, it's been in some of my most challenging times in life that I've felt God's presence the most. And maybe that's because I was looking for it more. I don't know. But it's been very clear to me that God is with me in the hard times, that trials aren't punishments, that, God's not doing it to me. It's that God is with me and that He may not remove the obstacle, but He will help me get through the trial. A few years ago, I was dealing with some health challenges and I kept praying that they would go away.
Hmm.
And then I
Hmm.
had this moment of clarity, which really felt like a revelation, that the thought was that it doesn't matter if they go away because God is with me no matter what, and that I can live a life full of love and purpose and discipleship, whether or not the challenges go away.
Wow. Well, I appreciated the conversation that we have had. Look forward to our future conversation with you and I and several others. Completely different project. Let's tease it because this episode will actually be put out. Tell people what that whole thing's going to be about.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, yeah, the other book that I have coming out is it's called Picturing Christ, Understanding Depictions of Jesus in History and Art. And I co-authored this with three BYU professors of ancient scripture, Daniel Becerra, Mark Ellison, and Matthew Gray. And this is just such a fun project. And in the book, we kind of walk you through how different cultures and times have thought about how to portray Jesus and why Jesus looks the way he does in the art. Um, how these images are culturally informed and how we might, as viewers, be more um, thoughtful in how we understand the art and why it looks the way it does. And then also kind of, thinking about some of the more diverse depictions of Jesus that we've been seeing more lately and why that might be important, especially in a global church.
Yeah. I love it. We're going to get to what I am, and they are not because they are BYU professors, and I would never put words in people's mouth. But we're going to get to the bottom of Mormon Jesus. We're gonna get
Okay. All
we're
right.
gonna we're gonna talk about that. So that's a tease for an upcoming episode. Jenny, I hope that this episode has nourished and strengthened your body. That if you weren't healthy enough to listen this week, that you'll be healthy enough to listen next week, and that when the time comes, you will be able to travel home in safety. In the meantime, go Tar Heels. Chris at Alpine Lakes Travel, the Tiger with a U, Debbie Wanless and Chocolate Cake Bites Podcast, and Latter Day 3D Studio. We'll be saving a seat for you on the back row of the Cultural Hall.
Save me a seat, it's sure to be neat on the back